Hey guys, welcome to the Heart of David. Hope you're all doing good today. I feel better today than I did yesterday, but we'll see, as I always eat as I go along, so I feel alright right now. Interesting topic today, and I'm just going to say a few things before I get to this topic. This is persecution of the early church for the first 300 years. It's worth knowing, right? It was just a Bible study that I did last night, and so I'm going to get to that. Wanted to say a few things. As I was walking last night, no, actually I want to say this first. I was just listening to Chronicles. What was it? Chronicles 13 or 14? Second Chronicles. And was it Asa? King Asa? Or was it the one before him? Anyways, it was against, it was Judah against Israel, okay? Correct me in the comment box. I didn't recognize this. That when they fought together, I think it was Asa. I'm pretty sure it was. Anyways, he was for God, okay? He was a good king of Judah, and they went up against Israel, and Jeroboam ambushed him in the front, but also in the rear. And so I guess the Lord warned him about it, and of course the Lord fought Judah's battles because they put their faith in him. Do you know how many people died on Israel's side? It's not just injured, it's all killed. 500,000. Remember, these aren't just Bible stories that you hear when you're a kid. These are actual deaths. That's 500,000 deaths. So just that one story there is all the dead of Ukraine. Ukraine alone. Pretty crazy. And then the story right after that was Ethiopia coming up against, I think it was Asa as well. I'd have to relook, but and with a million men, and then they fled too. So I'm gonna get right into this after I say this, because it's long. It's worth hearing. I was walking with my brother last night, okay? And so just making sure this is recording. I was walking with my brother last night, and of course it's my hope. He was my closest brother, right? He was 2 grades above me, and he's about 2.5 years older than me. We were best friends. We are best friends growing up, and we go on a lot of walks together, and it's my hope that he's saved, and it's also my hope that you can pray for me about that. I don't want to push myself on people, right? That kind of looks ugly sometimes, but to fit one thing in here and there doesn't hurt. I said to him, do you not see what these award shows, the Grammys, the Commonwealth Games, worshiping Baal, do you not see what they're doing? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, okay, this is what I'm going to tell you now, and I'm going to send you the proof. They're literally worshiping Satan, like Sam Smith, right? And I've told you guys, if my mother ever saw this, like, my mother died in 2017, they didn't have that kind of stuff. My mom loved those shows. And, when I was disabled that I had to stay on the couch all day, I used to watch all those with her. She would see them, she would feel sick, my mom loved the Lord, and I know I'm going to meet her again. But I said this to my brother, and so I said, listen, don't just erase what I send you, watch it. And I said, it's with every show. Every show gets worse. Think of Brazil. You think of all the different shows. They're all laced with something. I sent them the coronation of King Charles with the Grim Reaper in the background. I said to him, if you haven't read the instruction manual, the Bible, how are you going to know? I'm trying to get him to read the Bible without forcing it upon him. So I said, let's just wait for these Olympics ceremonies, okay? And sure enough, you've already seen the pale rider and hell following behind him. That was the Tower of Babel. That was the Tower of Babel. Listen, I'm going to put it in the description box, okay? Someone breaking down. He just broke it down very quickly. He's very good at doing this, but he did it within minutes, okay? He'll probably make a very detailed one. But the most disgusting of all was that they used trans people to do the Last Supper. At the Last Supper table, they're mocking Jesus Christ. They're mocking God. Anyways, I'm not gonna get mad over it, right? He who sits in the heaven laughs. You know, because these nations are just asking for hell to follow upon them. Remember that carnival thing in Brazil and all the hell that followed that? So, anyways, that's what I'm going to say about that. It's quite obvious they're mocking the Bible. And you know what? I also want to say this. I do watch politics. I watch people being grilled in the Senate when they're interviewing. When they're what's the name? Where people are subpoenaed to go and then they speak before the hearing, right? I watch those types of things. You know how Kamala Harris has taken the vice presidency or is going to actually I don't know what place she's actually in, to tell you the truth right now. You hear a lot about it, but you can put that down in the description box. Here's all I want to say. All of a sudden they turn on a dime from Joe Biden to her, right? She's the greatest. I've seen ads. Okay, I've seen full ads for the GOP, the Republicans, from the left, about the Republicans, saying that they're racist, they're misogynist, they're this, they're that. Why are they doing that? What makes them lie so blatantly to the public? What is in their hearts that makes them do this? Where did they come from? Where did these people come from? Were they there all along? Are they really that evil that they just lie through their teeth? They don't even care. Wow, man, it's Isaiah 5, right? It's just crazy. It just makes me think what the judgment that's going to come down upon these people. So let's get to this. I feel very passionate about this, and then the whole green agenda, anyways, it's all a lie. So give me a sec. $17 trillion. Trillion. It would take just to outfit the United States for what they are talking about. They don't have that money. Persecution in the early church. Beginning as a despised, illicit religious sect, Christianity endured 300 years of hostility to emerge as a dominant force in the Roman Empire, which would end up with Constantine, okay? He's going to be the end of all of what I'm talking about. Early Christians expected suffering. I don't know if I'm going to be able to finish this. All depends on how I Christ died on the cross, so there was no higher honor than to imitate that death through accepting martyrdom witnessed by one's blood. The Jewish legend legacy portrayed in writings such as the fourth book of Maccabees the glorious nature of death rather than renunciation of Israel. Even without this, Christianity would inevitably have held the martyr's death in high esteem. As the writer of 1 Peter expressed, if you suffer as a Christian, don't be ashamed, but praise God that you bear that name. You know, I'm not going to say myself that's something to look forward to, but if it must be, right, then let it be in the name. Why were they persecuted? How is it that the church underwent such sacrifices? The Roman religion was not intolerant. Rome had accepted into its pantheon deities from the Italian tribes from Asia Minor, so they would add gods. In the provinces, the great territorial gods such as Saturn in North Africa and Jehovah among the Jews were accepted as legal religion on the grounds that their rites, even if barbarous, were sanctified by ancient tradition. Countless local gods and goddesses worshipped by the ordinary inhabitants of the Greco-Roman world were often provided with the classical equivalent name and worshipped as Roman deities. Despite this toleration by the early 2nd century, the Roman governor of Bithynia on the Black Sea, so that's pretty high up. That's where all the fighting is going on with Ukraine and all that, you know, the Crimea. But I think they're talking about I don't know exactly where they're talking about, but had no hesitation in sending to immediate execution those who had been denounced as being Christian. So in one part of way far flung out was executing, and another wasn't. The name alone was a sufficient warrant for death. Reasons for the persecutions emerged from the record of Christianity's first 3 centuries. Fratricidal strife. Persecution didn't begin with the Roman authorities. The New Testament writings tell of fratricidal strife between Jews and Christians, the latter challenging the Jews by claiming to be the new Israel. In the early chapters of Acts, Stephen 7 verse 57, and James, the brother of John the disciple, Acts 12:2, became victims of the Jerusalem mob and King Herod Agrippa, respectively. Indeed, the writer of Luke, Acts, appears to go out of his way to reassure the Roman authorities of the loyalty and general value of the Christians and the hostility of the Jews towards them. You know, the story of the Christians is just like the Jews. You just can't get rid of them, right? Even more so with Christians, I would say, in a certain period, right? Give me a sec here. Because they became the diaspora, right, the Jews. So in that time, the persecutors and their motives changed in AD 64. On July 19th that year, a great fire engulfed much of the Rome. Only 4 of the 14 quarters of the city escaped damage. Suspicion immediately fell on Emperor Nero, and it was. Was this a madcap way of clearing part of the city to make room for new magnificent streets and buildings in his honor? Nero, however, managed to deflect blame first, apparently on the Jews, who had a reputation for large-scale arson, but also had friends at court. And then on to the Christians. Many Christians, perhaps including Peter, were seized, tortured, and done to death in the arena. Can you imagine? You never know what you're going to face in that arena. Tacitus, writing in 115 Common Era, included an account of the incident of his, I don't know if this is his Annals of War, because it says Annals, XV 44. So that's 15. Except for the manner of the Christian's death, which he thought excessively cruel, He showed no sympathy for the Christians, Tacitus, recording that Christus, from whom the name Christians had its origin, no, it wasn't, it was in Antioch, right? We know that, was executed by one of the procurators, Pontius Pilate. Tacitus described the Christians as I never read more about Pontius Pilate's life after. That'd be a good study, if there's anything. Tacitus described the Christians as a class hated for their abominations and guilty of hatred of the human race. Could it appear that way? It could. An accusation he also made against the Jews. Theirs was not a religion, but a deadly superstition, and hence worthy of repression. Though there was no immediate sequel to Nero's persecution, the fire forfeited any chance Christians might have had of being recognized as a legal religion. So if it wasn't for that, it could have been. If it wasn't for Nero setting a massive stadium that held 100,000 people. 100,000. A million. No. Okay. Separate from Judaism. So I'll repeat that again. As being recognized as a legal religion, separate from Judaism. I think it's important, maybe it's not important for you, but to round off all your Bible study and all that type of stuff and knowledge and wisdom about everything that's happened. I don't mean to become like a super historian or anything, but you know, after you read so much of the Bible, it's good to go and look at the history, you know. Another 30 years pass before we hear of a further action against the Christians, and then the evidence isn't watertight. Emperors were extremely suspicious of anything that seemed like superstition, like a threat, right, to them. For example, carrying a memento given by a Druid priest cost one Roman officer his life. In 95 to 96 AD, the Emperor Domitian acted drastically against some members of the Roman nobility accused of atheism. So you couldn't be an atheist, and lapsing into Jewish customs. It isn't sure that Christianity was meant. However, Domitilla, the emperor's kinswoman, Neptis, in brackets, who was exiled to the island of Pantelleria near Sicily, was believed to have been a Christian. Kinswoman, is that wife? The accusation of atheism, denial of the existence and power of the gods, might point in that direction. The veil was lifted, however, about 15 years later, and in 112 Common Era, so just say 112 AD, Pliny was sent by the Emperor Trajan, who ruled from 98 to 117, to Bithynia to restore the province from ravages. Isn't that what they just said? That's near the Black Sea at the beginning there? Caused by maladministration and corruption. He toured the province, and when he had reached the far east end, it is near Amastris, he encountered Christians. Pliny, though a lawyer by profession, had never been at a trial of Christians. The procedure he used was the same for the vast majority of criminal cases in the province. Cognitio extra ordinem, an arbitrary system of trial before a magistrate for offenses that fell outside of the range of statutory crimes, such as treason, forgery, or adultery. Adultery? Why would they care about that? Weren't they like all sexual? That sounds like Christianity and Judaism. As I already mentioned, I don't know, Pliny condemned to immediate execution those who confessed to being Christians, for I held no question that, in brackets, that whatever it was that they admitted, in any case, obstinacy and unbending perversity deserved to be punished. That's obviously not true. Christianity itself was punishable, but the defiant martyr attitude of the accused left Pliny in no doubt that his action was right. Pliny's difficulties arose when individuals agreed that they had been Christians once but were no longer, and persecution, and his letter to the emperor indicated his preference for leniency towards them. Trajan, the emperor, 96 to 117, responded in an ambiguous but fair-minded way. Christians were not to be sought out, treated like common criminals. If they recanted and worshipped our gods, sounds like Islam, they were to be freed. But those who persisted must be punished. Anonymous denunciations, however, were to be rejected as being a bad example and unworthy of our times. Okay, I was thinking another way. They're denouncing the gods. So they're saying, no, we are Christians. Okay, so around year 100, okay? We're going to all the way to 300. 12 years later, in 124-25, Christians gained a further concession. Anti-Christian riots had broken out in the province of Asia, Western Asia Minor, in 122-23, and the governor had written to Emperor Hadrian for advice. In response, Hadrian's rescript, his imperial order, allowed cases against Christians to be brought to trial, but ordered that the Christians had to be proven guilty of illegal acts before they could be condemned. Once again, slanderous attacks against Christians were forbidden. The rescript helped protect Christians, for now the emphasis was less on their name than on specific misdeeds. Christians might be unpopular. The empire must have heard a lot about the Christians, right? Christians might be unpopular and their cult technically illegal, but it would take a bold man to file an accusation that, if in any way flawed, could rebound with serious consequences. An accuser who had to await the arrival of one of the... because there were big punishments if you were accusing something that really didn't happen. Await the arrival of one of the senior official, the proconsul, able to try a capital case in the large province of Asia. No wonder Justin Martyr attached the text of Hadrian's rescript at the end of his first apology, written in 155. Precarious toleration. Between 125 and 60, Christians enjoyed a precarious toleration. So they had a time of peace between 125 and 160. That's a lot of time, right? If you just happen to be born in that time or something. Few martyrdoms are recorded in this era of prosperity that mark the climax of the Greco-Roman achievement. With the ascension of Marcus Aurelius as emperor in 161, however, the situation changed. First, the Christians were becoming exceedingly unpopular. They were blamed for causing natural disasters by refusing to worship the deities that protected communities. Christians were also accused of immorality, unnatural vice, and black magic, all calculated to bring the rest of the population into peril. An urban mob demanded the arrest of Polycarp, Bishop of Smyrna, during what the ecclesiastical historian Eusebius of Caesarea termed great persecutions that disturbed the province of Asia. Perhaps in February 156, but more likely 166 to 69, other Christians had to be seized, tried, and executed before Polycarp was arrested. One, a Phrygian, had rushed towards martyrdom. only to recant at the sight of the beast in the amphitheater. That just reminds me of Paul and saying beasts. I don't think Paul saw any beast at all. I don't think that's what he means. But I could be wrong. So, you know, they throw you in the arena. You see like a big bear. Imagine that. They open the thing, or they don't even open it. You know, you have a cage you can see through into an amphitheater. They have a tiger, a lion, and a bear. Hyenas, jackals, whatever they had in there. That would be scary. Polycarp was brought before the proconsul, who begged him to have respect for his great age. He was probably 100 years old, saying, "Swear by the genius of Caesar and denounce the atheists." But Polycarp, how are they atheists, right? But Polycarp, seeing the lawless heathen in the amphitheater, waved his hands at them and looked up to heaven with a groan and said, "Away with the atheists." The proconsul persisted. "Swear and I will release you. Curse Christ." And Polycarp replied, 86 years I have served him, and he has done me no wrong. How can I blaspheme my king who saved me? Oh, wow. I haven't read a lot about Polycarp. I've heard, though. He was condemned to death and burned alive. You know, when people are burned to death, when you see them like the Roman candles type thing, that's where the word comes from, Roman candles. Putting them in oil or tar. That type of thing, I think that's a quick death because it steals your oxygen very quickly. The story shows the efforts made by and you know, if you're ever in that position, if that ever happened, right? You just have to think to yourself, close your eyes and say, "Help me, Lord, help me, Lord, help me, Lord." And I bet he'll help you through that. I bet. The worst thing I ever heard, and I'm sure there are worse, that a person can do, was Emperor Nero, where he took, where they made a bronze bull and they hollowed it out, and they put, you know, like an escape hatch on the bottom. It was just a door. And they put a man in there. What was his name? He's in, Jesus talks about him in Revelation. What's his name again? I don't remember his name right now, but it's in the book of Revelation. This is what Nero did to him. He put him in a bronze bull, shut the door, lit a fire underneath it, and that bull, his snout, had holes in it. So he had people burning in Roman candles in the arena to keep it lit at night. And he had that. He was insane. So when they lit the fire, the guy would be moaning and they would sound like a bull. That's just a horrific story. This is what we'll no longer have to endure. It's a nightmare story, isn't it? The story shows the efforts made by an average, reasonable administrator in the 2nd century to persuade a Christian leader not to sacrifice his life, and the latter's complete commitment to Christianity, even in the face of death. Between the two outlooks, there is little room for compromise. Later in Marcus's reign, Aurelius, in 175, we hear of new decrees, probably emanating from the proconsul of Asia, making it easier for enemies to denounce Christian and seize their property. In one terrible pogrom at Lyon in Gaul, so France, in 177, 48 Christians were done to death in the amphitheater. Who knows by what means? rising tension. A new dynasty, the Severan dynasty. You hear that in scripture, Severus. Where exactly? I can't think right now. But it's there. Seized power in 193. I'd have to look again. In 193, at a crucial moment in the church's oh no, it isn't. It's another story. Relations with the empire. Though it remained illegal, the church was now much stronger in the previous century. So as time went on, they were just getting stronger. Christians were consolidated around urban communities governed by bishops who were in frequent contact by letter with one another. The church had its own liturgy, so you see how it's coming about, right? Now they're having their own liturgy. It's getting stronger. Its own sacred. To tell you the truth, personally, I like small meetings. I like the way that it was. Sacred writings separate from those of the Jews, and established rules of faith on which orthodox doctrines could be built. It also had begun to acquire property. The cemeteries and in Rome, the earliest catacombs date to 200 Common Era. Most important, the church had recovered its missionary urge, which after St. Paul and his disciples seemed to have diminished through much of the 2nd century. The result was great tension between Christians and pagans in provinces where the church was strong. I'm going to have to take a break in my voice here, guys. I'm about half done. And eat. Car paste. This is good to know. Now my stomach is just squeezing as I eat. The dynasty's individual emperors. Septimius Severus, 193 to 211. Caracalla, Sala, Caracalla, 211 to 217, and Elagabalus of 218 to 222, and Alexander Severus 222 to, so that was his son. So there was two Severuses, 222 to 235. Don't seem to have been personally ill disposed towards Christians. In the son, Alexander Severus's reign, the first building identifiable as a house church was erected in the frontier town of Dura Europos on the river Euphrates. The emperor's individual dispositions, however, were nullified by the wave of anti-Christian feeling in Carthage, Alexandria, Rome, and Corinth, which is in Greece, from about 202 to 210. The recorded victims of persecution were mainly converts, such as Perpetua and Felicitas in Carthage, martyred March 7th, 203. Or the disciples of Origen in Alexandria. The bishops and clergy seem not to have been affected. The end of the Severan dynasty in 235 brought another period of persecution under its supplanter, Maximus, gladiator? Maximus Decimus Meridius, is that not it? Maximinus Thrax, 235 to 238, 3 years, aimed, according to Eusebius, against the leaders of the church. So now they're going after the leaders. This was followed, however, by 12 years of calm in which the church extended its catacombs in Rome, and through its teacher Origen, 186 to 254, established for the first time an intellectual superiority over its pagan contemporaries. Origen, however, perceived the danger of the situation. There might not have been many martyrs to date, but persecution, if it came now, would be on a worldwide scale. He was right. Empire-wide persecution. Under the Emperor Decius, 249-51, the church experienced what, in retrospect, so 2 years he ruled, okay? And I wonder why. In retrospect, was its most severe test. Decius had come to power at a moment of grave military threat from the Goths, and economic and social decline in the cities. He blamed his predecessor Philip for military incompetence and the Christians, whom he believed Philip favored, for the breakdown of morale in the empire. His remedy was an explicit return to the former republican virtues, sounds like now, and the association of all inhabitants of the empire with the emperor's yearly sacrifice to the gods of Rome on the capital. Decius combined this move evidently with an order probably in December 249 to seize leading Christians. By January 20th, 250, Pope Fabian had been tried before the emperor himself and sentenced to be executed. The authorities went to great lengths to ensure compliance. In major cities such as Carthage, commissions saw that individuals did perform sacrifice and punish those who refused. So you had to sacrifice or you'd probably die. In Egypt, at least, there were commissioners in the country areas, and 44 of the certificates have survived. They follow a set pattern. One reads, to those appointed to see the sacrifices, from Aurelia Caris of the Egyptian village of Theodelphia. I have always continued to sacrifice and show reverence to the gods, and now in your presence I have poured a libation and sacrificed and eaten some of the sacrificial meat. I request you to certify this for me below. The date and official signatures follow, occupying several lines of papyrus. So this is proof. Caris retained one of the certificates for herself, and the other was deposited in the official archive, so one can imagine the bureaucratic nightmare the order caused. Contemporaries, both pagan and Christian historians of the next century, indicate that Decius's measures were initially very successful, all cowered with fear. As one contemporary writer said of the Christians in Alexandria, many fled, few wished to defy the emperor openly. What would Paul do? Alexandria and Carthage saw massive apostasies. In Smyrna, the bishop himself performed sacrifice. Wow. Is that any different than our Pope now? Those who defied the authorities, like the presbyter Pionius of Smyrna, were often regarded as simpletons of fanatics, eager to throw away their lives. The edict caused deep divisions among Christians, moreover, that brought merriment to pagan authorities. Decius's main aim had been to secure universal support by a sacrifice to the gods to restore Roman liberty. Once it had been achieved, by the early months of 251, the persecution was over. Decius died. It sounds to me that God took him away. You wonder why people die early? On a campaign against the Goths, Decius died in June 251 on a campaign against the Goths, and Bishop Cyprian, who had fled, returned to Carthage to aid demoralized and disorganized congregations. The church recovered its adherents rapidly, but faced issues. What to do about the multitudes who had lapsed, and how to treat the Novatianist schism in Rome and North Africa, which had repercussions throughout much of the church. The Novatianists, according to Eusebius, called themselves the pure. They would not allow those who had given in during the persecution to return to the church. So you can imagine that now. They'd be forgiven. Their movement foreshadowed more permanent division unless they had done something to help do something against other people. I don't know. It would all depend, right? Their movement foreshadowed more permanent division in the Christian church between those who put its integrity above all other values and those who regarded universality as all important. Sacrilegious instigators. The new Emperor Valerian, 253 to 260, at first tolerated the Christians, but in the summer of 257 suddenly altered his attitude. The emperor's policy was not to destroy the Christian church, but to bring it into conformity with public rights. Aimed at safeguarding the empire in time of peril, in July to August, he sent orders to deport Cyprian, bishop of Carthage, and Dionysius, bishop of Alexandria. So there were bishops all over the place. Bishop of Alexandria, to deport them. Other bishops were sent to the mines. So what they weren't doing was taking out leaders of the church. If they had gone and tried to do that, then they would have been more successful. But God. In addition, Christian places of worship and cemeteries were closed, and anyone entering did so at risk of execution. For nearly a year, there was an uneasy calm. The Christians, however, were not cowed as they were a few years before. So it's like Peter, right? You know, when he denied Christ and then realized everything that had happened, and then he was happy to go that way. We learn of numbers of visitors to Kiribis, where Cyprian was living, of forbidden Christian assemblies in a suburb of Alexandria, and of proselytizing by Dionysius, where he had been exiled. The emperor's patience broke. Around July 258, Valerian ordered that bishops, priests, and deacons be executed, that church property be confiscated, that socially superior laity lose their privileges and imperial civil rights. Civil servants be reduced to slavery, a status from which many had emerged. In some parts of the empire, this persecution, 258-259, was the bloodiest the church endured. On August 6th, think of what's happening in China, man, in India. This is the kind of stuff that's happening right now. You know, when I talk about, like, you know, trying to get my brother to Christ, whoever, right, that they just seem so blind no matter what the times are. If you put people in a place like China or India where they're having to hide and go underground, or North Korea where you're so oppressed, where the Bible isn't allowed, just one page of the Bible would make you so happy. It would free you. And that's what people don't understand, even me in this pain, how much freedom there is in Christ. That's one of the reasons my pain actually got better. Why? Faith and hope. Faith and hope. That's the answer. On August 6th, Pope Sixtus II was discovered conducting a service, Pope Sixtus II, in the catacomb of, there's a lot of difficult names, Praetextatus, and was martyred. I'll put this in the description box. Were all 7 of his deacons. The next month, Cyprian brought from his place of exile to face the ailing governor, Galerius Maximus Decimus Meridius. Russell Crowe. Once again, Cyprian refused to perform sacrifice. So he refused to sacrifice to the gods. In words that summed up the authorities, I just want to say this, and give me a sec. read all of Maccabees and read 7 sons. Read the 7 sons of, what is it, Seba? The woman and her 7 sons, where I think it's Antiochus Epiphanes has got them all, and he's torturing them all, and none of them are giving in. I've done that. I've read the whole account on this channel. I'd have to look back and see where it is. Maybe I try to hook it up, but no, it's not 7 sons of Seba. That's the New Testament, right? But anyways, it's the 7 sons of this woman, and you have to see the account. It's insane. He would let them go if only they would eat this or say this or whatever, and they didn't. They didn't. It's the most extreme example. It's amazing. Go look up that in Maccabees. And all Maccabees is why they have Hanukkah. I'm getting worse, a lot more pain as I'm going along, just my normal self. So where am I? Once again, Cyprian refused to perform sacrifice. In words that summed up the authorities' case against the Christians, the proconsul said, "You have lived a sacrilegious life, and you have gathered around yourself many vicious men in a conspiracy." Vicious. "You have set up for yourself up as an enemy of the Roman gods and their sacred rites, and the pious and most religious emperors Valerian and I'll just call him Gallienus, Augusti, and Valerian, the most notable Caesar, have been unable to bring you back to the observance of their," so this is the antithesis, "we haven't been able to bring you back to observance of our own sacred rituals. Therefore, having been apprehended as the instigator and ringleader of a criminal conspiracy, you will be executed. Conspiracy, illegal association, enmity towards the gods of Rome, these charges form the basis for the persecutions during the first 3 centuries. A lull before the storm. Valerian's death brought more than 40 years of peace. So remember what I said in the beginning, you just never know when that's going to come. 260 to 303. Okay, so we're coming near the end. So from 260 to 303 they had peace. Christians could still be arrested, however. For example, a Christian soldier, Marinus, lost his life when a jealous fellow soldier found that Marinus was to be promoted to the rank of centurion and denounced him as a Christian. You should read that account of that, what is it, a centurion or a Roman soldier officer who refused to I forget what it was. It's a good story though. Yet bishoprics multiplied and church buildings seem to have gone unhindered. In the imperial capital of Nicomedia, on the opposite side of the Bosporus to Constantinople, the Christian church stood in full view of the imperial palace. More important, the church now became a movement of the countryside as well as of the towns. In his ecclesiastical history, Eusebius quoted Dionysius of Alexandria, who hailed Gallienus as an emperor under whom the monarchy, as it were, put aside its old age and cleansed itself from its former wickedness, and now blossoms forth in fuller bloom. You know what I was going to say before I go on here? But I'm struggling. You know, as this goes along, you just see how it's getting, you know, the more persecution as it goes along, but they become more established, right? And then all of a sudden they have buildings and stuff like that. I look at the 1st century church, and that's the way I like it. Why? Because I think once it starts to become of size, a lot of stuff can go wrong. It doesn't seem so personal anymore. I don't like groups. I never like groups. That's just me. I just think there's a loss in the power of the Spirit that way. And you can obviously see that with a lot of mega churches and stuff like that, but that's just me. I'm going to pace here, and I'm going to read Final Great Persecution, and I'm coming close to the end. This is long, like I said. I'm glad because, you know, I prayed that I get a good rabbit. If you're ever going to buy a dwarf rabbit, if you're ever going to buy a rabbit in general, or whatever you happen to buy, a dog or whatever, I'm really happy because I had a rabbit for 13 years before, and it wasn't mine personally. It was just our family's. Came from a pet store, and it wasn't in our house first. It was my brother's. Gave it to his girlfriend, and they didn't really take care of it, or they couldn't take care of it, and he was really skittish for the rest of his life. So you never know. Like, buy it from a place, buy it from purebred. Why? Because they raise it. They're the ones, they see it born, right? They raise it up with cats and dogs, and they become really friendly, right? So that's what I got. He flops out like a dog. I could never pet my rabbit on the ground while he's lying down, ever. This guy, I can do that absolutely. I just wanted to throw that in. What I'm saying is buy purebred. It costs a little more, but it's worth the years, right? God willing. In 303, however, came 10 years of persecution, called the Great Persecution, as it became known. How and why, after 43 years of peace, did this happen? And before I even read on, I knew. What's the answer? Because there's always people right under the surface, right? It's always that way. There's always evil people. First, while the church appeared to be accepted, opposition to it was never far below the surface. Since 270, the pagans, inspired by the Neo-Platonist philosopher Porphyry, had begun to mount a serious intellectual assault on Christianity. The evangelists Porphyry wrote in 15 books against the Christians from 280 to 290, over 10 years, were the inventors, not the historians, of those things that they recorded about Jesus. This propaganda war between Christian and pagan champions intensified in the 290s. Just sounds like now. There has never been a more deceptive time than now. Second, in 284, Diocletian seized power by a coup d'etat and survived to become one of the greatest conservative reformers of all time. In March 286, he appointed a comrade-in-arms, Maximian, as co-emperor Augustus in the west, and on March 1st, 293, the two Augusti appointed two military men, Constantius and Galerius. Constantius was Constantine's father, as their assistants or Caesars. The emperor's ideal was to return to the traditional values of Rome. They imposed a uniform system of administration, currency, and in 301, prices throughout the empire. Uniformity and discipline were the watchwords of the age. Yet Christians remained a standing challenge to the unifying and conservative ideals of the emperor. Persecutions might have not occurred, however, but for the fortunes of war. In 296, Caesar Galerius, who was strongly anti-Christian, won a decisive victory over the Persians. With his victory, his influence over Diocletian increased. Diocletian's family contained some who were pro-Christian, and he was unwilling to act against the Christians, but his hand was forced partially by Galerius' steady pressure and partly by anti-Christian propaganda from some provincial governors. Between 298 and 302, the civil service and the army were gradually purged of Christians. Late in 302, the emperors visited the shrine of Apollo at Didyma, and the oracle complained and the baneful influence of the Christians, the just on the earth, in its pronouncements. The die was now cast. On February 23, 303, the feast of Terminalia, repression would start. I wonder if that's where the word terminated comes from. Terminalia, the feast of Terminalia. It could be. Churches were destroyed, Christian services banned, and the scriptures seized and burned. Christians in high places lost civil rights and those in households. Perhaps meaning private citizens were deprived of their liberty. One concession Diocletian secured: no bloodshed. He secured that there would be no bloodshed. A second edict imposed an obligation on all clergy to sacrifice, but the prisons became too full, and in the autumn of 303 this was modified, and most of those in prison for refusing were released. So far the persecution had not been as severe as under Valerian. Scriptures were seized, but among Christians there was often consternation and grudging compliance. Only a minority of determined souls held out. Born again. I don't know. Years later, the day of handing over was remembered as a day of disaster by the North African Christians. I'm going to have to take a break here, guys. Nature. I'll be back in a sec. Good for you if you listen thus far. In the year 304, with Diocletian ill in Rome, Galerius seized his chance and imposed a universal obligation to sacrifice on pain of death. Up to then, only the clergy had been involved directly. Now the pressure was on every single Christian. The number of martyrs increased, as did the defiance of the Christians. One inscription from a North African church lists 34 men and women who suffered under the laws of the divine emperors Diocletian and Maximian. In Phrygia, a whole community was wiped out. And Egypt saw 8 years of ruthless repression, which among the Coptic Christians earned the reign of Diocletian the title, the era of the martyrs. It's coming to the end, guys. A grudging concession. This phase ended on, this is very important information, I think, because it's like, I'm not really interested in church history past the first few hundred years. I'm just not. There's nothing in it for me. I'm well aware of the Catholic Church and the stuff they've done, right? This phase ended on May 1st, 305, when Diocletian and his Western colleague Maximian formally abdicated, to be succeeded by Galerius and Constantius, respectively. In the West, Constantius took no further action, and on his death, his son, Constantine, was proclaimed emperor by his troops. In the next 5 years, Constantine gradually increased his authority and although an adherent of Apollo, followed his father's policy of toleration towards Christians. My view on Constantine, man, like, if not for him, a lot of things wouldn't have happened. Excuse me. And he put a lot of things into place, but it's clear to me that he wasn't truly, I don't think he was truly saved. That's what I'm saying. Because of the other things he was involved with. It was like playing both sides. In the East, however, Galerius renewed persecution, accompanied by anti-Christian propaganda and great effort to reorganize paganism along Christian I always get this screwed up. Hierarchy structures. It was too late. Steam gradually ran out of the enforcement of the edicts, and no martyrs are recorded in this phase after 310. I wonder how many were martyred. I wonder. They give those small numbers, but I'm sure it's a lot bigger than they say. I mean, it just doesn't say it in here. In April 311, Galerius, realizing that he was dying, decided that enough was enough and revoked the edicts of persecution on his death. In the spirit of Diocletian's reform, he wrote, "We wished previously, always acting for the good of the commonwealth, to correct all things according to the ancient laws and public discipline of the Romans. However, too many Christians had failed to conform, and rather than they should not worship any god, they might henceforth exist again. Their meeting houses were to be restored, and their prayers for our good estate were asked. This last request was in vain, for Galerius died 6 days later. Galerius' concession of failure was grudging but decisive. The empire could not be preserved by the immortal gods, with the Christian god possessing a veto over their powers." In the spring of 312, Constantine entered on a final bid for supremacy in the West, campaigning against his rival Maxentius through north and central Italy. I didn't know this. He reached within 5 miles of Rome on October 27th. That night he had a vision or dream that convinced him of his own destiny that lay with Christianity. The next day he defeated Maxentius' superior forces and entered Rome in triumph. I think the only other people who ever took Rome was Canada. Do you know that? It wasn't the United States, it was Canada. In World War II, Canada took Rome. Can you imagine the Canadians were the first ones to take a major city in that in the Western sphere? But the Americans took the glory because they kind of had to reflect the power of the States. My grandpa fought in World War II, and his brother, so it's my great uncle, died in Italy. All my grandpa's brothers fought, except I think for a couple. They had a lot of brothers, and one died by an 88 in Italy. His name was Jack or John. That night he had a vision or dream that convinced him that is, okay, I said that. In February 313, Constantine met Licinius, who had succeeded to Galerius' European dominions, and in a document that has become known as the Edict of Milan, formally ended the persecution. The Edict of Milan. All individuals were to be free to follow their own conscience. In fact, the edict proved to be the death knell of the immortal gods. You think of Paul, right? The unknown God. 11 years, I wonder what he would have said. And 11 years later, in 324, Constantine defeated Licinius and proclaimed his adherence to Christianity and his aim that Christianity should become the religion of the empire, now united under his sole rule. The church had triumphed. Oh, yikes. Give me a sec here, guys. This is the last part. Why the Christians triumphed. Yeah, it's just like one more paragraph. I have a lot of trouble with my throat, but I guess talking on here actually really really helps it. Why had the Christians won? First, they had become too strong to be defeated. In some provinces, such as Bithynia, and by the way, in China, it's just exploding. Such as Bithynian, how do you say that? Cyrenaica, today northern Egypt, and Libya. This is Libya, I think. They may already have formed a majority, and they were well organized. Furthermore, Christians attracted people, as a Neoplatonist philosopher explained in the year 300, by the religion's simplicity, its direct moral teaching and promise, uncomplicated by its rival's mythology. And there they were, calling the Christians sick and twisted, and they were calling us immoral. More than that, Christianity had never lost its martyr spirit. As one contemporary, Lactantius, explained, there's another cause why God permits persecutions to be carried out against us, that the people of God may be increased. So when we're persecuted and people see that, it causes people to have faith, to see they were persecuted, but they took it. You know, they're persecuted, but why are they still taking it? There must be something to this, but we don't know, right? People rejected the old gods because of the cruelties perpetrated in their names. People inquired, what was so good that it seemed preferable to life itself, so that neither loss of goods nor the... Sorry guys, I'm having trouble with my throat. It's because I'm eating. It gets worse. You know, your stomach and everything that connects is a smooth muscle, right? That's why I get worse. So I have a disorder like dystonia, just opposite muscles, adductor versus abductor muscles. And for some reason, because I have those other pain disorders of my, kidney stones and all that type of stuff, I don't even want to talk about that, but it ends up squeezing my throat. So that neither loss of goods, nor of the light, nor bodily pain or tortures deter them. In Egypt in 311 to 312, Eusebius of Caesarea was an eyewitness of the final horrors of Maximinus's persecution. He writes that we ourselves beheld, when we were at these places, many Copts, C-O-P-T-S, all at once in a single day, some of whom suffered beheading, others punishment by fire, so that the murderous axe was dulled. So after all those years, it was just dulled, and here we were, still here, right? And worn out, was broken in pieces, and the executioners grew utterly weary. It was then that we observed a most marvelous eagerness and a truly divine power and zeal in those who placed their faith in the Christ of God. Thus, as soon as sentence was given against the first, some from one quarter and others from another would leap up to the tribunal before the judge and confess themselves Christians. Popular opinion had been changing in favor of Christianity in the previous 30 years. Because remember, there was like 30 years of peace, right? And then all of a sudden, there was one more persecution, as I just read. Against such spirit, the pagan authorities were powerless. They might sometimes win intellectual combats, proving Plato was a cleverer man than St. Paul. I don't agree. But those who regarded death as liberation had the last word. God bless, guys. That's worthwhile to know all this.